Okay, so we just read the Grimm brothers story Cinderella. Do you want to give a summary and then we'll talk about it?
Mhm. So there was a wealthy man and his wife fell sick, and as she was dying, she called her daughter to the bedside, and she told her that to be a good and pious person, and that God will always protect her. Then she passed away, and after that happened, the father got married, I think, in the next spring, um, and she the new stepmother had two daughters with her, and they mistreated um the girl Cinderella. They mistreated her. They forced her to do hard labor in the kitchen, and yeah, she was given like a bed sheet as a for clothes, and yeah, she was just neglected and couldn't have anything nice. And every day Cinderella would visit her mother's grave and uh I think cry. Um, and whenever I think whenever she was there, a little bird would come. Um, yeah, and then one day the her father was going away on travels, and he asked each daughter they would like for him to bring. So one stepdaughter said she wanted pretty dresses. The next one wanted pearls and jewels. And then when he asked Cinderella what she wanted, she said that she wanted the first branch that would hit him, like on his travels. And on his way back, um, I think his leg got caught in a piece of like a hazel wood branch. Oh,
I think he got hit by it, but yeah, anyway.
yes, by a hazel bush. And so he took that branch from the hazel bush and he took it back to Cinderella. In Cinderella, she took that hazel bush branch and she placed it at her mother's grave. And she would cry so much when she visited it that the branch grew and grew and became a tree. And from the tree, a little white bird would come every time she went there to sit under. And whatever she wished for, the little bird would grant. Eventually, there was word of a festival to appointed all set up by the king to help his son, the prince, find a bride. So all the eligible girls from across the land were able to come. And of course, the stepdaughters were going. But when Cinderella asked to come, she was denied, and she was crying about not being able to go to the ball. So she begged the stepmother, and the stepmother told her that if she could find some lentils, a bowl of lentils scattered among the ashes, she would be able to go. So she scattered the lentils and some ashes, and then she asked the doves and pigeons for help. And within an hour, they were all able to gather the lentils. And once she presented it to the stepmother said that it wasn't enough and that she would have to actually find two bowls of lentils scattered in the ashes. So the same thing happened, and Cinderella called upon the pigeons and doves to help her. And she was able to pick it within the hour. Um, and once she came back to the stepmother told her that uh, she was dirty and she couldn't dance. Um, and and that it wasn't enough for her to be able to do that. So she made another excuse for Cinderella not to go. And yet Cinderella still had to help the stepdaughters prepare for the festival.
Hmm.
So once she faced the I think it was the second or third rejection, uh, she went to the hazel tree on her mom's grave and she wept and said, shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold throw down to me. And then the little dove came down and threw a dress over to her and some shoes. So she dressed up and she went to the ball. And when she arrived, uh no one could recognize her, not even her stepsisters. And the prince noticed her and would only dance with her throughout the night. And he would tell all the other suitors that she was his partner. Uh, and when it came time to leave, Cinderella was able to escape quickly, and she went back to, I don't know where she lived, but like in the little pigeon house
Yeah,
or
it's like he
in the
started to
kitchen.
walk her home, but then yeah,
Hmm.
she escaped into there.
Yeah, so she quickly went back to the tree and took off the gown and the shoes, and the little bird took it away, and she went back to the kitchen and went back to being like covered in ashes and her raggedy clothing. And then on the second day,
Well, we should
she
mention
wants,
that the prince looked for her and asked her stepfather and said she had gone into the pigeon house, and then so he destroyed the pigeon house, but she escaped before they could see that she was in it.
so then on the second day of the festival, she once again went back to the little tree, and this time she said, shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold throw down over me. And this time the little doves they threw an even more beautiful gown down to her. And she once again went back to the festival, and everyone there was more astonished than the last time. And the prince was only focused on her, and he said the same thing that she was his partner and no one else was to dance with her. And she was able to escape a second time. Mm, I think she
This
escaped the
into a
same way.
pear tree. She climbs up it like a squirrel.
Yeah, yeah. So she did that, and yeah, she was able to go back to the kitchen and dress up in her gray gown again. And she wasn't recognized or discovered. And then on the third day, she went back to the little tree and she said the same thing, shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold throw down over me. And this time the bird threw down a magnificent dress uh, that was still levels above the previous ones. And when she went, she was well, she caught everyone's eye, of course.
And they were so
It was just,
astonished they couldn't really
mhm,
speak.
mhm. And once again, the king's son sought her out, and this time he was feeling anxious. So he had prepared for her escaping him again, and he put tar over a stairwell. So this time, when Cinderella ran away, it caught one of her shoes, uh, and he used that to try to find her. So she once again escaped and wasn't caught or anything. And she left behind the shoe. So the prince started going to households looking for her, or maybe he already knew what kind of household it was.
Yeah, he'd already been
uh,
there and met her stepfather.
mhm, mhm. So he went back and he spoke to the stepmother, and of course, she wanted to present her daughters and pass them off as the ones that fit in the shoe. So she told the first stepdaughter uh, she couldn't fit her toe in the shoe. So the stepmother took her aside and instructed her to cut her toe off and rationalized that once she's a queen, she won't have use for her feet. So the stepdaughter cut her toe off and was able to fit in the shoe. And She they convinced the prince that she was the true bride. So they got on the carriage, and as they passed the hazel bush tree, the little pigeon said, turn and peep, there's blood within the shoe. The shoe is too small for her. The true bride awaits for you." And he noticed her foot and realized it was bleeding. So he took her back to the household and told the stepmother that this one wasn't the true bride and that to give her the real one. So the stepmother took the second stepdaughter and she was able to fit her feet in the shoe, but not the heel. And this time, the stepmother instructed the second stepdaughter to cut a bit of her heel because once again, once she's queen, she won't have need for her feet. And the prince was convinced again, so he took her back on the carriage. And as he passed the hazel bush tree again, the pigeons said, turn and peep, there's blood within the shoe. The shoe is too small for her, the true bride waits for you." So they repeated the same thing, and when the prince looked down, he realized that there was blood on her white stocking. So he knew she wasn't the one, and he took her back again. And this time the father was present, and the prince asked if there was any other maiden in the household. And he told him that there's Cinderella, but that it couldn't possibly be her. Um, but he still insisted on seeing her. So uh, Cinderella came down and to the stepmother and daughter's shock, like her, she was able to fit in the shoe perfectly. And the prince then knew that she was the true bride and he was able to recognize her face. And he immediately took her off into the carriage um, and they got married. And then on the wedding day, the stepmother and daughters, they wanted to get on Cinderella's good side now and share the fortune. So, uh, yeah, they came, and as they were walking with Cinderella, some pigeons came and pecked one of her eyes out. And when they walked back with Cinderella, they had reverse sides. So then the pigeons took the other eye out. So they were blinded in both eyes for the rest of their lives.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Again, really good retelling. Uh, yeah, a longer story than we often read. Very famous story, obviously. And in this version, yes, no glass slipper. That's apparently in some somewhat disputed French version. Uh, I don't know if we mentioned also that she was wearing wooden shoes when she was the Cinderella, the girl among the cinders.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Um, yeah, what did you think of this story?
Mhm. Yeah, it's like a once again like the very common theme of an injustice, but then uh virtue kind of winning over that and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
the person's, having a good life eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a horrible disruption with the mother dying, but then there's a usurpation by stepmother and maybe stepchildren. In this case, yeah, two
Mm,
step daughters. And they further try to sort of not let Cinderella compete on a level playing field with for the favors of the prince.
mhm,
But in the end, yes, they are punished and she is rewarded. So there's
mhm,
that whole arc. Yeah, and she has the virtues which are not visible exactly, but and she, she visits her mom in the back of the house. That's not visible. She's covered in ash. She's wearing like an old gray sheet. So everything about Cinderella throughout most of the story is hidden. And it seems like as the story progresses, more and more of her is shown
Mhm.
to where she is, when she goes to the ball, she has the beautiful dresses, progressively more beautiful, and progressively sort of gaining the power of the story to where in the first ball, her stepmother and stepdaughters don't recognize her. And there's also something about how they're blind, how they always talk about sight, like Cinderella, you're not you don't have a dress and you can't dance. So they see what's on the surface,
Mhm.
but they don't see truth. So they don't see like Cinderella when she shows up at the ball.
Mhm.
And anyway, yeah, Cinderella gains power throughout the story to where during the third ball, uh, everyone is astonished and they cannot speak. So
Mhm.
there's slowly and slowly her will or her intent is sort of like blossoming to the story to
Mhm.
where in the end, you know, she gets the prince, she gets a life, she gets out of the house, and she gets recognized, and the fittingly, I guess the stepdaughters are blinded for their
Mhm.
blindness to the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mentioned to you you might like this story because there's lots of birds in it. The pigeons are the ones that out the stepdaughters as the having uh uh deformed themselves in order to fit the uh
Mhm.
the slippers. And there's probably something about that, like they're not they're not fitting the slippers, they're not being right for that role, they're being imposters. And then during the third pass, when he's with Cinderella, they're doves, and the doves alight on her shoulders, one on each shoulder. And
Mhm.
later on, uh, during the wedding, the stepsisters are on either of her sides, and the two birds, yeah, peck out their two one eye
Mhm.
each, and then later there's a reversal, as you mentioned, they peck out the other eyes. There's maybe something about balance there,
Yeah.
about balance and imbalance.
Yeah. And I thought about how like pigeons and doves are kind of like common or kind of humble kind of birds
Mm,
that people tend to overlook or that
mm.
just aren't remarkable, I guess.
Well,
Um,
aren't doves like a special symbol of,
well, they are.
love?
Maybe I was thinking more pigeons. Yeah.
Yeah, pigeons definitely, I would think. Although pigeons and doves are the same bird, aren't they? It's just they
Hmm.
look different,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we
And
refer to them differently.
yeah.
And they're different symbolically. Yeah, pigeons are the common way of referring to them, and doves are the more elegant. Yeah, what else did you think about this story?
Mm. Well, yeah, I think it was just talking about like maybe what virtues are good for like in a woman, what makes a good woman.
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of
definitely.
feminine virtues.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned her piety, which her mother had entreated her to never lose sight of. In the beginning of the story, yeah, she says, "Be good and pious, and then God will always protect you. Heaven will be near you." And then,
Mm.
yeah, she always does that. She ritualistically goes to her mother's grave 3 times a day and grieves for her. There's no mention of the father grieving for his lost
Mm.
wife. He and as you mentioned, he sort of the next spring or the next turning of the season, he kind of is remarried and essentially has a new family because she has
Mm.
he has the two daughters, which he then kind of takes care of better than Cinderella.
Mm.
And by the end of the story, he refers to Cinderella talking to the prince as like the kitchen wench. So it's like,
Mm.
uh, is she not your daughter anymore?
Hmm.
It's like, but yeah, he never seems to protect her or anything.
Hmm. Yeah, there's that. And Yeah, and then there's the instances where she's not focused on being ostentatious or like
Yes,
concerned with her
exactly.
appearance.
Exactly right.
Because she's not requesting the fancy dresses and the
That's right.
pearls, for example, at the beginning.
That's
And
right.
like you
Yeah.
said, she kind of remains more hidden throughout the story, which, traditionally, maybe that's kind of what would kind of make a good wife uh, and mother.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think in terms of virtues, yeah, those are more
yeah.
hidden than the more ostentatious things by
Hmm.
definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she is the most beautiful to physically look at once she kind of gets the gifts bestowed upon her by heaven, so to speak. But yeah,
Mm.
she never asked for it and she wasn't doing that. So that fits in with kind of how we tend to think of as virtue as something that is not directly given. It's not like you do a certain amount of work and then you get paid with virtue. It's more
Mm.
indirect. It has something to do with true intent. It
Mm.
has something to do with the truth of character, and that's has to do with this
Hmm.
sort of inner thing that may even be hidden
Hmm.
from many people themselves.
Yeah. 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 And I feel like with the dresses getting, as you mentioned, progressively more and more beautiful, it's kind of symbolic of that being visible on the outside. Like,
Yeah. Do you think maybe that's like virtue becomes the inner becomes more and more visible to the outside eventually? And then
mm,
the outer maybe becomes more and more visible too, where the girl's
mm,
getting deformed as the stepsisters getting deformed as the story takes place, getting a toe cut off, getting part of a heel cut off, and then
mm,
getting the eyes pecked out.
mm.
Yeah, they get more and more
Yeah.
deformed.
Yeah. Because they're also initially described as beautiful too, but
Yeah, that's right.
it just catches up with them,
That's
that
right.
lack of virtue.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, they're beautiful. They're fair of face. It later says they have pretty feet.
Mm,
It's just they're not quite the right fit, which makes all the difference. Yeah. Why does Cinderella run away from him?
mm.
I mean, you
I
could
don't
say
know,
it's
like,
simply part of the game between men and women of sort of playing hard to get or being pursued or something like that. That might be part of it. There might be
mm,
this might be like she needs to preserve her dignity because she showed up, and that is in a way putting herself out there, which may be a little bit like she wanted to preserve her innocent dignity and like
mm,
run away and still be sought after by the prince instead of like do all
mm,
the work to get together with him.
mm,
And she does do a lot of work to get away from him, even going into the pigeon house and going up into the pear tree. And then in the third time, running away so quick after the ball that he wouldn't have gotten to her if he had not used the stratagem of having the stairs covered with the pitch.
mm,
But what if he had not done that stratagem? Like he wouldn't have found her, right?
mm,
But maybe he wouldn't be worthy of her hand if if he so it shows that he has wits, and so maybe it's like, yeah, his intelligence is somehow matched with her virtue.
mm,
Yeah, because otherwise would he have looked very good in the story if he doesn't have wits, and he only has those wits after like two times of sort of being fooled. But otherwise, like he's just a prince. He's sought after, but I mean, I don't know if any other sort of strengths of his are mentioned, character traits,
mm,
but he at least has that. He has to be told, he can't tell. He has to be told that the stepsisters are not the woman that he sought after. And even
Mm.
he can't tell Cinderella is until she puts on the shoe and then his eyes are opened. But then again, I think that's more a key to the story. The fact that when the shoe fits, it's like everything changes in his perception and
Mm.
maybe everybody's perception. Because it had mentioned that before she came to try the slipper on, she had washed her hands and her face. So
Mm.
you would think he could recognize her from that, but no, he did not. She had to put on the slipper first, and then he recognized her. But what do you think that means?
Mm. I don't know, maybe it's kind of showing like how sometimes people may not be able to recognize virtue at first until like
Until the
uh
accoutrements of virtue are shown to them.
yeah um
Yeah, because the slipper is related to her piety and her
mm,
grieving and her faith.
mm,
And also, it's just sort of a sign of the sort of her grace from sort of heaven, right? The
mm,
grace given to her,
mm,
not necessarily earned.
mm. Yeah, so maybe it's just kind of showing more his development in a way. Uh,
He's been fooled twice, but
mhm,
you know, now he's sort of. One thing I wanted to point out about, you know, I was trying to suss out maybe the character traits of the prince. Haven't figured out that much, but you know, one thing that distinguishes Cinderella from the daughters also is her work. Like she works. You know, she's working in the kitchen. She's covered in the ashes, and also she has to work after she asked her stepmother to go to the ball. Now it's kind of pointless work, but she does like work, although the pigeons and the turtle doves and all the like birds of the sky like do the work for her. But that's something that distinguishes her from the stepdaughters, I think, who do
mhm,
no work, who only sort of, if we think of this as like mate competition, the way that they try to win a mate is by putting their competition down, by increasing their adornment, but not necessarily their character or anything like that.
mhm,
And later by deforming themselves, which you could look at as kind of a sacrifice, though, but it's still linked to deception.
mhm,
And later on, they also tried to wheedle themselves into the good graces of their former stepsis, their stepsister, now the sort of princess or
mhm.
queen. And yeah, that doesn't turn out too well for them. But yeah,
Yeah.
Cinderella is the one that has the virtues and does the work and has the faith, and that, and she's the one that sort of wins the mate competition. Yeah, what else did you think?
Mhm. Well, yeah, I do wonder about the wooden shoe now that you mentioned it. Uh,
Yeah, I don't know enough about what that might be, what that might mean in the
yeah,
culture. It's
yeah,
obviously
me
kind of
neither.
a clog.
Yeah, it's like they describe it as a heavy wooden shoe, so I wonder if it's just like a symbolic of just kind of imprisonment and kind of in a type of
Might
way,
be, yeah. Yeah, and then
or
later she
something
just has a
dragging it
slipper,
down.
which is the lightest of garments. And
Hmm.
also the stepmother links the clothing, which we could presume includes the slippers, to dancing, to playfulness, to expression, to winning a mate and things like that. And, you know, as opposed to the clothes that she have, which are related to work. She's wearing a sheet, just part of the house. She's
Hmm.
wearing the cloggy kind of wooden shoes, which are,
Hmm.
not yeah, not a part of dancing. And yes, yeah,
Hmm.
maybe linked to kind of imprisonment.
Yeah, or maybe not per se something more positive, but I've heard like in the Dutch culture, of course, like traditionally they wear wooden shoes, and
Mm.
I don't know, I saw a video or something where they said the reason they did that is because they were actually very practical.
Well, yeah, because it's a
Like
wet
good for
country, right?
work. Yeah, so maybe it's just also symbolic of how she works hard all the time too.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah.
But either way, we can see it's contrasted, to the
Hmm.
slippers. We can, that's one way to analyze the story is just like seeing the contrasts
Hmm.
of the very few characters. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to think that also this story has like the lot of transformation. You can look at the transformation of Cinderella, which I talked some about already, and also the transformation of the stepsisters too, which they start off beautiful of appearance, but black of heart, and slowly, yeah, their appearance, their form degenerates too. But yeah, Cinderella slow, she descends, and it's almost like she's a ghost or I talked about her kind of being invisible and
Hmm.
she more and more becomes more glorious in her visibility and
Hmm.
eventually is, shocks people and they're astonished and they cannot speak. And I thought that contrasted with how much the step sisters and stepmother speak, especially towards the beginning of the story. When they first come into the house there, the story talks about how she's mocked, and this reminds me of sort of what the Roman soldiers did with Jesus, mocking him as the as a king. Here they mock her as a princess. Look at the proud princess. How decked out is she? They cried and laughed and led her into the kitchen. And that, so there's a lot of speaking roles for them. And the later on, the stepmother kind of when Cinderella tries to express herself and to show her will by, she's been toiling away in the house in the kitchen, but now I want to go to the ball. Just ask the stepmother to go to the ball. And the stepmother then says, again, is speaking in a mocking way. You're dusty and dirty. You have no clothes and shoes. You can't dance. You're not going to dance, and then Cinderella persists, and so Cinderella is really expressing her will here. She's kind of coming alive in some way in voice in the story. And then the stepmother kind of gives her, speaks sort of, you could say falsely, I guess, because she gives her like a meaningless task.
Hmm.
But the meaningless task is part of a deal that she's making with Cinderella. If you can finish picking these lentils out of the ash, then you can go to the ball. Okay. But then she speaks falsely because she gives her another meaningless task when she finishes that. And again, in terms of the work of Cinderella, like Cinderella finishes those tasks in half the time that has been allotted. And the time that has been allotted is like impossibly short as it is. So again, this is an example of like the how this reminds me of that the four agreements, always be impeccable with your word. Cinderella is always impeccable with her word, but the stepmother is consistently not consistently using her words to lie, to trick, to lie, to demean. Yeah. And just looking at the speaking lines, the voice of the prince, I mean, we don't know much about him most of the story, but we just know he says to the other suitors, "This is my partner." So already at the beginning, yeah, he's got eyes only for her. Yeah. What anything else you noticed about this story?
Not so far.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there'll be more, but
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, you may be a little bit tired. I enjoyed this story. Yeah. Is this just about virtues and how virtues win out and how, the true self kind of shows later on? How the mother, in a way, I mentioned the kind of parallel to Jesus, like how the mother kind of resurrects in a way in the form of her daughter, like eventually her daughter who is crying out back in the house, in the kitchen, sleeping sleeping by the fireplace, covered in ashes, ghost-like, who eventually who more and more as the story progresses becomes more and more glorious and shining and attractive and making people not be able to speak, kind of like, in the presence of like of God or something like that, or divine presence. Yeah, but anything else you see besides that?
Well, I wonder what the hazel tree, if what's symbolic of that tree.
Yeah, I didn't know that
Yeah.
either. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that. But what did you think about the her asking for that gift from her father when he comes back from the fair from town, of just like
Mhm.
the hazel branch?
Well, maybe she was already thinking of connection with her mother. Um,
Mm. And
that's
either
all she
way,
really wanted, it seems, to stay connected. And she was visiting the grave already every single day.
mm,
Um, so yeah, it seems like in her heart, that's what would, sustain her, and
mm,
that's virtuous. Yeah.
mm. And yeah, the hazel tree, it seems like some kind of tap on the shoulder from the mom, right? Like
Mm,
this is like we look out at the world and traditionally often people would see certain things from nature that happen by chance, or we would say happen by chance, as like some kind of divine sign.
mm,
Like, in the ancient world, sometimes they'd see like a little bit of overheard conversation as like significant. Like you happen to hear that people walking by the window or something that might be significant. Or like I've told you in Homer's Odyssey, when if someone like sneezes after or coughs maybe after like someone else says something, that's looked as like a punctuation to that sentence that was said, and that sentence is a true sentence. But I wondered if that hazel tree that kind of catches the father, it's like a kind of a sign, or I don't know if sign is the right word, but it's like it's sort of the voice of the dead mother, the voice of uh her soul like speaking. And
mm,
then yeah, she has to do the work of like planting it in the grave, and then that is the connection from her mother to this world, is that
mm,
tree, which often, trees are seen as that, like the sort of the navel of the world or something, or the connection of the sort of unseen deeper reality into this world, like the cross of Jesus or the Bodhi tree that the Buddha sat under to gain
mm,
enlightenment. It's sort of this connection and transformation, the spiritual transformation from that connection that happens. And yeah, that's where after the tree is there, then the birds have somewhere to alight, and then and the birds are the ones that bring the dresses and that allow her to then go forward in life and connect with the prince and change her life and move out of the house and everything. So we can see there's always like something that is in one part of the story that is like a precursor to the next thing happening, which is, sort of fits with like good literature. But anything else about this story for now?
mm.
Did you like this
So far.
story?
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, me too. There's probably maybe other stuff we can unpack later, but
Mm.
maybe this one has come to an end. So, yeah. Well, until next week.
Sounds good.